For the first time in Amazon's history, workers at a Staten Island fulfillment center have voted to form a union. An Intercept investigation went inside the union busting and organizing effort. Let's take a look.
Amazon's JFK 8 warehouse on Staten Island employs over 8,000 workers. In late March, workers there voted on whether or not to form a union. The workers' demands include higher wages, longer break times, and safer work conditions.
We want people to have $30 an hour. We want people to have better break times and eating periods.
Data published by the New York Times, OSHA, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics show the warehouse has an extremely high worker turnover rate and an injury rate 3 times higher than the national average.
When you look at the pointless, avoidable deaths that happened during the pandemic, there are people who the outcome of this election is life or death.
But Amazon went to great lengths to ensure a no vote. Amazon plastered the inside of the warehouse with anti-union posters, and workers accused management of removing union material from break rooms.
Sorry, I was just wondering what you have right here.
It is illegal to take down union literature when it's in a break room.
2 founding members of the union, fired by Amazon in 2020 under questionable circumstances, were unable to vote. Chris Smalls.
Last year I was fired, wrongfully terminated for holding a protest.
And Gerald Bryson.
See the paperwork now. We know what they said, so why am I jobless?
It's not just, is the ALU going to be able to survive for another election if this one is illegally messed with by Amazon? But what's going to happen if the federal enforcement agency is unable to actually enforce federal law under the National Labor Relations Act? What rights is anyone going to have?
The organizing efforts grew out of a protest against Amazon's lack of COVID safety precautions in March 2020.
We started to ask them, what do they intend to do to make that place safe for us? And all we could get was, oh, we'll get back to you. This proceeded from there to where we started to strike. This is when we started to protest.
Internal Amazon communications from court proceedings obtained by The Intercept show that the company knew about the protest days before it happened, and that Smalls and Bryson were on a list of people expected to participate.
What's keeping people from coming out the building? These people got bills to pay.
Communications show that 4 days before the protest, an HR manager and her associate were already discussing the fact that Smalls would be fired after the protest and worried about the perception of retaliation for his termination. Smalls was then notified he was in close contact with an infected worker and ordered to quarantine.
I'm quarantined, but why they quarantine me and not my people?
Smalls was fired a few hours later. Amazon responded to our request for comment, stating, "We terminated Mr. Smalls for putting the health and safety of others at risk and violations of terms of his employment."
Basically, after that, we were protesting. They fired Chris for the first week, and I took more of a leading role the second week.
A few days later, while legally protesting in the parking lot, Gerald Bryson was fired for an altercation that was captured in this video. The video shows a fellow worker who came outside to smoke and initiates the argument with Bryson.
Ain't gonna shut it down. It's the only fucking job open, so appreciate it.
We don't have to appreciate something.
The exchange, which lasts about 5 minutes, has Bryson trading insults with the other worker.
Your mother's a hoe.
Go back to the Bronx.
Go back to the Bronx. I'm from right here. I'm sorry. Sorry, gutter bitch.
Just like your mama. You wanna bring it? I'll bring it.
I'm out here for you, because you can't fight for yourself.
The altercation happens. She goes back inside, and almost immediately, Amazon management springs into action to gather evidence about the altercation, starting with a statement from the woman herself.
They said I called her a nigger and a cunt. And if I would have called her anything, I would have called her a bitch. I ain't gonna call her a nigger. She's a little white girl. Like, come on, stupid.
A review of the full hour-long video confirms that Bryson did not use those specific slurs. Bryson was fired for vulgar language, and the other worker was only given a written warning.
If they'd fired her too, I don't know if we would be here right now, right? But the fact that they didn't means that the reason they fired Gerald is because he was protesting. Not because he called her a bitch, it's because he was protesting.
An Amazon spokesperson acknowledged The Intercept's request for comment on Bryson's termination, but did not provide a direct answer.
I mean, you can see the paperwork now. We know what they said, and it didn't happen. When you look at the film, it didn't happen. So why am I jobless?
The reason they fired Chris is because he had the audacity to tell Amazon they needed to protect their workers. When they fired up that anti-union machine and fired Chris, that was the exact same machine that was churning along when they fired Gerald.
The National Labor Relations Board took up Bryson's case in June 2020. The government agency believes that he was wrongfully terminated and that he should be reinstated at work, and Amazon notify all workers at the JFK 8 warehouse of his wrongful termination and reinstatement. Over the course of the next 2 years, Chris Smalls and Gerald Bryson, along with several other workers at the JFK 8 warehouse, worked to organize the early stages of a new union, now referred to as the Amazon Labor Union, or ALU, and were granted a union election by the NLRB. In response to the union activity, Amazon ramped up their union busting efforts. Video by workers inside the warehouse reveals the extent of Amazon's union busting campaign. Another video shows so-called captive audience meetings held by consultants Amazon has hired, which workers are required to attend.
When I listen to your feedback and then I hear what the union is saying, I am concerned that the ALU's interests do not align with yours.
We hope you will vote and vote
yes
to the union.
Amazon has not disclosed how much they spent on union busting, but forms filed with the Office of Labor Management give us an idea of how much they're spending on captive audience meetings alone. 1 month before the union election, Chris Smalls was dropping off food to workers inside the warehouse. We met Smalls outside to interview him when he was approached by building management.
Some stunt to get back. What's up, man?
To ask anyone who is not an Amazon employee to please leave the property.
About 10 minutes later, police arrived and arrested Smalls for trespassing. An Amazon spokesperson responded to the Intercept's request for comment on Smalls' arrest, stating, "Mr. Smalls, who is not employed by Amazon, has repeatedly trespassed despite multiple warnings. When police officers asked Mr. Smalls to leave, he instead chose to escalate the situation, and the police made their own decision on how to respond." The union argued that Smalls, a founding member of the union, should be allowed outside the building as a visitor to help organize, and that calling the police was an aggressive union-busting tactic. 1 week before the election, and nearly 2 years after his termination, Bryson has not been allowed to return to work, despite the National Labor Relations Board finding Amazon wrongfully terminated him and filing an injunction demanding his return.
There's no reason for me to be standing here with no job or no money, bank account's exhausted. You know, I'm a single father. I had a little $39,000 a year salary, 2 years. They still refuse to pay me. All praise is due to the National Labor Relations Board. They fought for this, and yes, I'm gonna have a chance. Hopefully I will be in there to vote along with, you know, my fellow laborers.
Amazon continued to delay the ruling on Bryson's return to work by requesting more time in discovery.
Time is a weapon that Amazon is using against its worker organizers. And the longer that Gerald goes without work, the harder it's going to be for anybody else to have the courage to stand up and say, hey, what you're doing is wrong. Protect us. Protect us from the pandemic. Protect us from harassment, discrimination.
Bryson was not reinstated before the election.
I got some bad news today, so I'm not going to make it in this for the JFK election. We have to suffer more, so my rent won't be paid. I really don't know, man. I don't know. I'm lost, and I won't lie to you, I'm lost. I'll figure it out.
On April 1st, 2022, the election results were announced. The final vote count was 2,654 yes and 2,131 no, marking a historic victory for organized labor.
ALU! 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 This is a worldwide movement, and like I said, me going back in that building is a worldwide situation, you know, to show there's hope. There's Amazons throughout the world, and there's labor movements throughout the world, and there's people in the same situation as us right here. This gives everybody hope. If Amazon, the number one, could be beat, anybody can be beat.